I don't want to ever paint any situation with a broad brush. Some of the finest CEOs I have ever met are people on Wall Street. I mean, really incredible individuals. They were incredible before the crash, and they're incredible today. A good example is Henry Kravis. Henry Kravis, who led KKR for many, many years, a man who's very, very wealthy, very, very successful, one of the first big investment bankers. This is a man who's a quality class act. He is the real deal. And so there are many, many really fine CEOs around as well. So just because you're on Wall Street doesn't mean you're going to be a bad person. But it is possible that some of the people that have given us the trouble we have were, I don't mean bad people, because I don't think anybody was bad. I think that they just may have been managing in an inappropriate way. And perhaps they themselves had either too big of an ego and therefore were too full of themselves, or maybe too small of an ego and had and felt they had to be tough where you really didn't have to be. You have to be tough, but you don't necessarily have to be unkind. You always have to be, firm. Yes, sir.
Mr. Baker, I wondered if you could correlate the leadership style of kindness with openness to employee participation in business. There's some fairly good evidence by Kent State University and their Ohio Employee Ownership Center that businesses that use significant employee participation in both deciding how they do things and how they manage their finances, et cetera, do well and sustain longer, maybe have better profits even than the ones that don't. And is that something you see as being corollary?
By the way, Kent has done some nice work in this area, and I'm familiar with it. And the answer is yes, yes, yes to all of that. I mean, all of this has to do with communication and allowing people to feel to have their own heads. And you're always going to find that they're going to find the group is always going to usually find better solutions than an individual. There have been a number of kind of management training exercises that are done. One CEO told me, he said, one thing that was really an eye-opener to him, because he was a very successful and a good manager, and he said, I always felt that I would know the way. And he said that they sat and they did one of these exercises in which they were given some kind of a theoretical problem, and he came up with a solution. And then they sat as a group and they worked on it, and they came up with a different solution. And these were these were things that had actually occurred in history. So then the leader of the group revealed what the real answer to the problem was, and the group solution was the better answer than the one that the leader had come up with alone. You'll always have, with many minds working on something, and if there's openness, somebody has to finally make the decision, but there's usually always a better solution that is found.
Yes, sir.
Is that a clip-on or the real thing?
I know it's legit.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Has any of the research shown any tendency to tie this, the bully boss tendency, to what's perceived as a general tendency toward incivility in our society in general?
Well, I don't know. I think we can blame a lot of things on the incivility of our society in general. An awful lot of it is the huge pressure that all of us are under. I mean, it is, it's amazing. I had to finally turn my BlackBerry off because I was afraid that this thing would be buzzing like crazy while I was standing up. I mean, there's so much going on. The pressures that we're all under, we're all juggling these things. And then you overlay that with the more important pressures, your families and all of the other stuff. So I think it makes people sometimes wind up becoming short. And this is a tough time. This is a tough, and then when you add the toughest one of all right now, maybe not the toughest, but another major thing, which is this awful economy and the fears that individuals have, you can see why people wind up being the way they are. So sometimes we just have to inhale and rethink the situation. There was an interesting article my wife handed me about meditation. It was in one of these journals of meditation, yoga type journal, and it was written by a head of HR of some companies. She did not identify the company or her last name, this woman. But it sounded like a pretty good-sized company, a large HR department who had done a merger with another company. So, thousands of people were going to be let go, including in her own department, like virtually everybody in her department but her, when they merged and all that stuff. And the difficult times, you also think about the difficult times the managers have when they let people go, or these HR departments who are, face-to-face with people. They know the family's issue. They know somebody who has a sick child, and these are really, really tough things. And the way she has got around this was meditation, was really, try to focus on these individuals, was herself, because, a lot of HR people wind up being, develop drinking problems and drugs and everything else because they're under these really phenomenal pressures. There was a story that I said, and perhaps these were really in better times, but in my career, there's one individual who's one of my favorite employees that I fired 5 times. Literally fired him 5 times. He was he was the founder of All News Radio, and that was before I knew him. And we built a couple big television networks and everything. And he wound up being president of one of the networks. But there were circumstances where I had no choice. We were shutting down a business, or we were doing this, or we were doing that. And I think the 4th time I walked into the office, he said, "Bill, is this it now?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You're making it pretty easy on me." But he knew we had such a relationship that he knew that the next time a big job came, he knew that I really respected him and that I really needed him. The next big job, there he was, and I was first to hire him. When I spent 5 months in Berlin last year, and I was studying companies in Germany. And I talked to one man. By the way, you would also think, my assumption was that in Germany it would be, "You will do as I say." That's the kind of management. Quite the exact opposite. Matter of fact, much of European management is much more consensual than American management. German companies are some of the best in the world. And most people, too, think, at least I thought, German companies tended to be really big, the Siemens and the BMWs and the Volkswagens. Well, 90% of all the German companies are small businesses, but many of them best of class in the world, which, by the way, I think is a direction that I see Cleveland going. I think there will be more and more small businesses here, best of class in the world. Anyway, I talked to this one fellow who said that during a period of tough times, he had to fire 40% of his staff. He said it was the hardest thing he ever did. And he said he decided he'd do it personally. And he went to each one and explained the circumstance and how bad he felt and all this, and that, that he didn't want to do it and it had nothing to do with them. And but they just didn't have the money anymore, etc. And so he said it was really a pretty awful experience. And he said 2 years later, when the economy came back and their business started doing better and they had to hire people back, he said every one of those people came back. Every one of them. So there's a lot of merit to that. And these times, my dad and my mom worked in 2 businesses here in Cleveland, basically their entire lives. That's not going to happen again. Even people like me who've had long 10-year careers. I was at 3 companies better than 10 years each one, and the last one 20 years. You don't see these long 10-year jobs anymore. So it's hard to have kind of, you don't always assume now that the company will be loyal to you because you know that the company often can't be loyal to you, but you can be loyal to people. Because I've seen time and time again, every industry we're in ultimately is a small industry. You keep bumping into the same people, even though they go here and there and Europe or wherever they come back, and the relationships that you develop, the loyalties that you develop with people, will ultimately help your career as well. And if you're a leader, you're going to need those people for your new job, people that you've met and know that are some of the best people.
Bill, you've had a lot of jobs. Were you ever
Maybe I'm going to have a few more, but yeah.
Were you 2 parts? Mm-hmm. Were you ever fired? And if so, how did it go? And secondly, are B schools, business schools, including leadership and kind and good in their curriculum?
I think the answer is first, yes, I have been fired. And matter of fact, once was here in Cleveland.